Thank you. I'm calling the workshop to order. This is Commissioner Fretham from District 1. We can go around and do, with starting with
Okay.
Hold on.
Corey Reinhardt, County Commissioner, District 7.
Jim McDonough, County Commissioner, District 6.
Trista Castillo, District 3.
Maggie Duran, Planning Manager, ETCI.
Joanna Berg, Deputy County Manager.
Ryan O'Connor, County Manager.
Mary Jo McGuire, County Commissioner, District 2.
Me?
Jeff Moss, Information Services.
Great. So I'll let Commissioner Ortega introduce himself.
Rafael Ortega, District 5.
Great. And Commissioner Carter?
Look at you. Tony Carter, District 4.
Excellent. Thank you all. So we will be kicking off this workshop on open space project and access. Asking for this for a couple of years now. Just a few housekeeping notes. There are about 3 kind of buckets that the information will be coming in. What we'll do is we'll stop at the end of each of those to take questions. So after we get through the land inventory, the open space assessment, and the underutilized land identification. So try to jot down your questions or put your hand out and I'll write it down and we'll get through because there's a lot of information that we want to go through here. The other piece of this is this really is just a discussion about what's out there. At this point, where the staff aren't prepared and it's in progress, but they're not prepared to talk about implications in terms of no net loss provisions. So those questions, let's save those for when we can come forward with more information on that. And then the other piece you'll note at the end, our last section is underutilized land identification, and this is really just identifying underutilized land. There isn't a plan for any of it yet, and this isn't the right space to really dig into it too much. Just know staff are working and thinking about that. But really the whole purpose of this is to really look at what's out there and what do we have in front of us and where are our opportunities. And with that, I'll turn it over to Joanna Berg.
Thank you, Commissioner, and I appreciate your generosity in saying you've been looking for this for a couple of years. I think it's been a little longer than that, but I do want to say that this was really the first project that we picked up coming out of the height of COVID when we brought down the incident management group and we wanted to really think about other things. This is what we jumped into. And I want to laud Maggie and the cross-functional team we have here for all of the work here. Very much a work in progress, but we're really excited by what we've been able to do. We're anxious to show it to you today and to get your thoughts on our next steps. And with that, I will turn it over to Maggie.
Thank you. So we thank you for the opportunity, Chair Fretham, Commissioner, County Manager O'Connor, Deputy County Manager Berg. I appreciate the opportunity to share what the work our team has been doing here. We feel like this is a good news story. We know you've had a long day, and so we hope that you're able to luxuriate in this with us a little bit as we talk about cross-departmental efforts and curiosity and opportunity, and really an example of the county being proactive. Our goal is really to be able to share the fun work that these great minds have been able to bring forward over the years. So I am the first speaker on behalf of this team, but you'll get to hear from a variety of us throughout the presentation today. To lead you through our agenda quickly, I'll be doing a little bit around scoping and framing, and this is really to frame up for you what were the questions that started us off in the first place, and then what questions did we realize part of that. So just kind of baselining where we're going to go. We will then move in to talk about Ramsey County land inventory. This will be a chance for us to talk about Ramsey County as a landowner and manager. For the first time, we're really seeing this collectively through the eyes of a whole county rather than a single department and their role in it. We're then going to zoom out a little bit and we're going to talk about open space assessment. This is looking across our entire county, both lands we own and those of our public partners, to look at the access that our residents have to resources and where there are gaps within our community that we really need to understand better. And then finally, we will wrap up by zooming back into Ramsey County-owned land, where we'll talk about underutilized properties. And this is really a chance for us to examine lands with high potential for change. As mentioned at the beginning, we're not providing solutions for those parcels at this time. We are simply letting you know that there is certain information that we know about how we can be better land stewards looking at this information, and that there are partners around the county who are already diving into this and are in the right place to help us figure out what to do with this information. Again, our purpose is really to bring you guys up to speed on the work that we've been doing over the last year, and to seek input from you on the work to date and the recommendations. With that, I want to take a brief moment to just acknowledge the team. We have an amazing team here who have each provided their amazing minds, expertise, curiosity, and dedication to get you the products that you will hear today. It is not every day that you see Parks and Information Services and the County Attorney's Office and CED coming together on a happy purpose and leaving with smiles on their face. But this is one of those projects where I can tell you every meeting had laughter, and they all seemed very enthusiastic to be there while they taught me a lot about what it means to talk about land and land use, as I am not a land expert in any way, shape, or form. So they entertained me, and we now get to entertain you as we move through the presentation today. But it really is the great work of these folks behind me that we're able to get something that actually is coherent, hopefully, and moves you through the different ways that we can talk and think about land in Ramsey County.
And the best name for a team in the county.
We did not plan that part. So what was our scope? So again, the team started off by really talking about this concept of open space. And this term was really used in a variety of different ways as we started our preliminary conversations. And so the first thing we had to do was define what is open space so that we were talking about it from a common language place, and then we could build from there. We then looked at what open space resources are available and kind of really the accessibility for residents to access that open space. And we were asking ourselves the question around adequacy. Is there enough of this existing resource to meet? As we moved into those conversations, we then realized there was additional questions that needed to be addressed as well. So we had to understand what lands does Ramsey County actually own. We learned that hadn't been done before, where we looked collectively in that sort of fashion, at least not in the collective memory that our team had, not to say it hasn't been done before, but really taking the opportunity to look collectively across the county and see what we own. We wanted to understand if there were specific policies that govern these lands that we needed to address or understand as we were building this. And then finally, it led us to asking the questions about whether or not there were opportunities to repurpose county lands for open space or to meet other needs. So again, we weren't diving into those solutions, but are there any lands where those questions really should be addressed or asked at a high level? It's important, and my team expressed this to me multiple times as they were teaching me about land. It's important for me to frame up what our role is as we move through this conversation. So what is our role as a county? Cities are really the ones who have zoning and permitting authority. They are the ones who build the comprehensive plans and have zoning power. As we move through the conversation, we're really going to be focusing on Ramsey County as that property owner, land manager. We do not have land use planning or zoning authority. And so this is really a place where you'll hear us talk about the need to partner with a number of those public partners that we have around us and within our community as we think about opportunities that come out of the discussions today. So they felt this was very important. They taught me a lot on this front, and I valued that discussion so I could understand where should we be moving and the work that we've been doing, and where really should we be moving as we move through our conversation today. So the last slide I will have before I hand it off to my amazing team is to really walk you through the 3 definitions that we created as a group, and I will take a moment to actually read them to you because they are important. The first definition that we came up with was around open space. This is land with natural features and opportunities for recreation, including outdoor facilities, landscape amenities, and critical natural resources that are publicly accessible and contribute to public health, outdoor education, aesthetic enjoyment, and ecosystem stability. As we created that definition, which again was our initial focus, we realized we had to create these 2 subsequent definitions as well because they really help us bucket the types of land that Ramsey County owns into these 3 large categories or these 3 large buckets. Fully developed property, I think, defines itself pretty easily, but these are parcels, buildings, or facilities that are fully utilized as a prescribed use with minimal land available for outdoor recreational opportunities or conservation. So we think of things like Plato building has a big building on it. It's got a parking lot. It is fully using the land that's available in the way that it's intended to. And so we really don't focus more on those within the work that we've been doing. We recognize that those are being used appropriately and don't merit additional. And then underutilized property was that 3rd bucket that came out of our discussions because we realized that there was something that fell between open space and these fully developed properties. Underutilized property is really parcels, buildings, or facilities that are not used at their full prescribed capacity, including land that could be repurposed or preserved for recreational, aesthetic, conservation, or other development purposes. Again, today you'll hear more about that. We're not proposing how they should be used. We're simply identifying that these are lands where there should be additional questions. Some of them, in fact, are already under discussion by the board and others throughout the county about how those lands could be reevaluated. So those are the three buckets or the three large categories that our team works to develop and define. You will hear a lot more today about open space, that first definition, and then you'll hear a little bit at the end about that category around underutilized properties as well. With that, I will pause very briefly to see if you have any questions at this moment on the framing, and then I will hand it off to my team to move it.
I don't see any.
Great. So then I will hand it off to Jeff. I'll invite Jeff to come up, and Jeff will walk us through the Ramsey County land inventory of our presentation. Here, he will be zooming in to focus on lands that Ramsey County owns and manages. And at a very high level, because we do have additional reports if you really want to dive into the weeds, he's going to share a little bit with us about what we were able to learn about Ramsey County as a landowner. I'll hand it to Jeff.
Before I start, I think I can acknowledge on behalf of our team how much we appreciated Maggie's liaison, no, seriously, working with this group to get your questions and bring that back to us so we can handle things at a technical level. So we appreciate it. All right, thanks much. I've been here. As I like to say, power corrupts, PowerPoint corrupts, absolutely. Very good. So, before I get started, before I get started, I want to kind of focus the mind of the group. So again, as Maggie alluded to, I will be focused on just land that Ramsey County owns. My colleague Scott, who's coming up next, will have a broader view of open space land that is including Ramsey County as well as our municipal and other parts. My focus is just on county stuff. So, obviously, as a county government, we are a landowner. Ramsey County, we own land for a variety of purposes, Parks and Rec being a big one, our administrative facilities, public works, we have trails, we have right-of-way, we have, environmental protection activities, wetlands and stormwater ponds and so on. And as you can see from the map, that the majority of the lands that we own are in the northern half and eastern half, roughly, of the county. And as you'll also note, most of those lands are colored green. That's for a very good reason. Those lands are primarily dedicated to open space or park or related activities like that. So how much exactly do we own? Well, Ramsey County as a government owns 7% of the land within Ramsey County's boundary. That totals to about 11.8 square miles. And so what part of that is actually dedicated to open space? So of the 11.8 square miles that we own, 10.5 square miles are committed to some form of open space. So a statistic that you can walk away with this meeting with will be 6.17% of the land inside Ramsey County is county-owned and dedicated to some form of open space activity.
Put that on a bumper sticker.
Bumper, there you go. There you go. We look back over the past 20 years, and in an attempt to kind of understand the trends, where have we been, where are we going? Since 2002, 20 years ago, Ramsey County has experienced a net increase of almost 1,000 acres, so 1.5 square miles of land in what we actually own. Now, we sell land, we purchase land, we do land swaps with municipalities, so there's a constant, land coming in, land going out. But over the past 2 decades, we have a net increase of 969 acres. The county's various land acquisitions in the past 20-year period have included a significant amount of land for open space. And this slide is very, very telling in terms of that 969 net acres of net gain, 576 of that are directly administered by the Parks and Rec Department. So we are in a position of continual increase of that. The bottom line, again, it's a very cursory, just a few slides here, but the bottom line of this is the county has been and continues to be a significant contributor of open space resources for our residents. Most of the land that we own is for that purpose, and we continue to acquire that land for that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just want to add one thing here, because I was the commissioner's assistant in 1984 and 1985. And Bob Orth was the commissioner at that point that has the role from your district. He was adamant about the open space that we needed to do and that we needed to make sure that it was, protected. And so I just want to give him a shout out. He's been on quite some time, but, you know, sometimes we forget the history. That, oh, we've had that much, and in the last 20 years, we've increased it, that's great. But if we hadn't had pioneers like that, you know, in the 70s and 80s, we wouldn't have it to protect anymore.
The trends, at least from the past 20 years, for which we have data, bear that out. So, excellent. All right. So we put together quite a bit of data from this study, and we wanted to find a way to be able to share that with you guys in an easy-to-consume format. So my colleague, Chris Ulrich, who is in our GIS group and information services, has created a very easy-to-use, very user-friendly web application. We have that. I believe we're going to probably share the slides, so we'll be able to share that link with you guys, and you can explore the data. You can click on every parcel that the county owns. You can see it in the context of all the open space as well. In the course of using that web resource, if you have questions, please get in touch with us. We're happy to answer those. And if there's additional data that you'd like to see in context of this information, let us know. If we have the data, we'll put that in there for you.
So I would challenge you to find something that Jeff hasn't already discovered for us. He's very good at coming up with many different ways to look at this that tell us a lot of great information.
Can I just ask a clarifying question? Is wetland included in the
Yes.
count? So wetland is counted as open space?
Yes.
Our lakes and stuff?
Well, lakes are a different animal.
Okay.
Wetlands, a lake, well, we're going to get in the weeds here. Just for a second, give me 30 seconds. So lake bed is generally owned by the state. So if we have a parcel and that parcel goes into the lake and it's a defined parcel, the state owns the lake bed, but wetlands, because they're not open water, they're still land technically. Did we get a wetland delineator in here to maybe talk about their science? It's not my expertise.
It's good enough,
Yep,
thanks.
okay. Finally, so in looking at this land inventory and pulling this information together, we realized we got some recommendations we'd like to advance and hopefully work on. So obviously, it would be helpful to have a more frequent interval of reporting to leadership on what we have and what's going on. So knowing our full portfolio of real estate, of land holdings and so on, being able to track trends and changes in overall land use going on in the county, and a sort of an ongoing inventory of available open space resources, both those managed by the county and those managed by other partners, because for most folks that use open space resources in the county, whether a city runs a park or a county runs a park or it's a regional park, it's very transparent to the neighborhood user who visits that. And so we're recommending that we should put together some sort of inventory to have something, sort of an annual summary that we can provide to leadership, maybe a one-pager, update that website, and so you can kind of keep your finger on the pulse of what's happening with that. And then at a pace of probably every 5 years, provide a more comprehensive report, more detailed maps. And the reason we chose 5 years is, as you know, the Metropolitan Council manages things like sanitary sewer and transit planning and so forth. And they are required by the legislature every 5 years to do a full land use assessment of the entire region. We feel we can add our report to that sort of 5-year cadence and build upon the work that they're doing.
I'm going to let County Manager O'Connor jump in first, and then any questions?
Madam Chair, I just want to add, I think this is a big deal to have available, and I've gotten to share that with all of you in the run-up to today. I've been excited to share it. And when we started this, we didn't know what we were actually going to find, which is kind of a scary way to start a project. Sometimes you don't know what you're going to find, you don't know what comes back, which can beget other questions as you go. The two things that stood out, and this is a good spot just to remind them, or to put them forward. One, back when we adopted the economic prosperity goal, there's always been an undercurrent as we went out and talked to our cities and community of this belief that development and preservation run oppositionally in a community. And quite frankly, there's so much opportunity still for smarter development on existing land in many cases that does not have to be the case. And this really demonstrated that for me. If you look at our growth as a county since 2002, alongside the green space, or open space, you can see how there's a narrative there that we can continue to work on. The bigger piece was the understanding though of a baseline, and thinking about the League of Local Governments came up earlier today actually from a different presentation, but this feels like something where we could go city by city, but also an opportunity to find a way to collectively bring this in front of our cities. Just brings with it such an opportunity over the coming year. I don't want to let us leave without calling that out, because a shared understanding helps to have better conversations, I think, as we go forward. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Question?
Or is this where you're stopping?
Right.
I got two slides I'd want to go back to.
Mm-hmm.
Go back to your slide, where you had the data stuff. So is that, could you actually drill down to, like, when you click on there, it would say, like, when we acquired it, or how we acquired it? Is there, if it was donated, was there, restrictions put on that piece of property?
No, that would require a full title search for each
Okay.
one. This is simply
That's
data we get from the, assessor's office, that's tax data, and we merge that with a little piece of geometry that shows the extent of the parcel,
Okay.
so that's not in there. No, you would, that stuff would be available in a title search for each.
Okay. Would that give you the ID number, so you could actually go back, pull up and, all right. And then go back to your slide where you were doing kind of the percentages and the acres of open space.
This one here?
Yeah, 'cause, Ryan talked about the bottom one being a bumper sticker, but actually what jumped out at me, that I think I wanted to make sure we called out, how much land do we totally own? 7,500 acres, 11.8 miles, how much of that is actually open space? 6,900, I mean, the percentage of what we actually own, I'm not totally perfect on that, but it's well over 90% of what we own is actually already in open space somehow.
That's why we made it green on the map, to kind of really drill that point home.
I mean, that's a big number to put on the bumper sticker, actually.
Better.
We'll get some more stats you'll like to.
We got room for 2 bumper stickers?
This should be a wrap.
Well, I think everybody here knows how much I love the environment and garbage and talking about all that kind of good stuff. Well, my next favorite thing is GIS.
True.
Because,
Yeah.
virtually every decision we make is, well, and it should be data-based, and much of that is attainable through GIS. It's not just maps. And that was something that I learned a long time ago when I first became a commissioner, actually, that it's so much more than that, and it informs things. Because an acre is an acre is an acre is not true. What you can build there, what you have there, what amenities are there, what obstacles are there, and who lives there and what they need. All of these things come through GIS. And so I was very excited to see this coming forward. And actually, I talked earlier today about the fact that I'm on the Minnesota Geospatial Advisory Council. And I brought this up. We had a leadership meeting yesterday in preparation for our upcoming meeting. And Jeff has been part of that for a long time, and Metro GIS before that. And said, we need to, for GIS, you don't really think about it until you have a presentation that's something like this. But they're really humble folks, as I've stated many times before. But I think also when we are up at, even at the legislature, the tools that we can get, when we're talking about climate change and we talk about some of the efforts that we have for transit and transportation, there's a lot of data that we can use to bolster our arguments. And so, and I brought that up because, again, this group is, they just do their work. I don't know how else to put it, and are not out there promoting or trying to, get the resources that they need, because they are kind of quiet about that stuff. But this is really, when you get into it, it's really very, very cool. I know I told that to Trista when I said garbage was really cool, and then she believed me, so.
Right, others?
One question that I have, I know that one of the things that we did with Metro GIS was that you could, if you wanted to go to a park, and I know that we had a tool at one point, and I don't know if we still have it or not, where you could actually say, gee, I want to go to a park that has this amenity and that amenity. And you could do an actual, tour of the park, a virtual tour of the trail, I think it was. Do we still have that?
I think that was the Go Ramsey app, that
Yeah.
predates my time.
Yeah.
I've only
Okay,
been
so we don't
here
have anything
about
like
2
that,
years.
or we do?
It's not operational.
Oh, that's too bad.
It was a great, it was a great app, and it, I think we just didn't keep investing in it for some reason. Maybe, I don't know, I really liked it
Scott can answer
too,
that
but
when
I
he comes
think we
up there.
stopped doing it, we stopped keeping it up to date. and maybe the grant that we used for it ended, or,
I can follow up
Yeah,
with
okay.
Mark, and we can get back to folks.
okay, thanks. Came up at an active living meeting, and we were
Yeah.
gonna get some information on it, too. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah.
You're the Madam Chair, here, I'm looking at Trista, sorry,
Yeah.
sorry.
It's
Sorry,
been
Madam.
it's been shifting
Sorry,
today.
Madam Chair. Yeah. Sorry.
All right, well,
Yeah.
I think we can move to the open space assessment.
Thank you.
Chair.
I will go through that.
Yeah, you will.
Control.
All right. Hi, everyone. Scott Yonke, Parks and Rec. So now that, one, I want to thank Jeff from giving presentation on the land inventory section, but now we're going to be transitioning over to the open space assessment. So it's important to know that the land inventory was a little more specific on Ramsey County properties. Now we're zooming out on all of Ramsey County, all land across Ramsey County, basically, so. Okay. So, to determine open space needs, the group, we really needed to understand, open space in Ramsey County and who manages or operates open spaces. So, we were able to pull some data back in late 2021 when this project started. And so this is some of the information that we're finding out on this. So 15% of the county, or 25.6 square miles, is open space. So that is across the whole county. And what's important to also know is, Ramsey County is a portion of this, but it also shows other governmental agencies within Ramsey County that also have. So that's an important key factor that we should remember here. But so the table below, it kind of identifies the split in the percentage of open space, and then the map on the right, you can start seeing where this open space is located throughout the county. If it's county, if it's a city managed open space, state, or so it kind of shows a geographical representation.
School district is the same color as water, so where is the school district?
You're right.
Yeah.
It's in there,
It's so small, it's probably not even.
Okay.
It's probably.
We'll follow up with you
Yeah,
on that.
it's really kind of, there's one dot somewhere.
It's
Find it.
funny.
You're right, that's a good observation.
You do see it mostly on top of it. Yeah, right.
Why?
Well, so that kind of begs the question, I don't have the definition in front of me, but actually in the city of St. Paul, I can think of 4 or 5 sites that are almost a block that were schools. The buildings are gone, they're basically open spaces for the communities. Are they a part of this, or are they defined in that, or? Remind me of what the definition is of what you're counting for this.
Yeah, so that's a great question, Commissioner, great question, Commissioner, Madam Chair, I'll get the order right
That
eventually.
was good.
Probably not. So I think the important thing to think about here, and this is an important distinction as we move through the discussion about what is and isn't open space.
Right.
Something like a baseball field, it has a defined purpose, it's got, infrastructure on it of some type, that does not fit our definition of open space. So this is really those natural areas where I could walk out into a grass space and I could maybe play a pickup game of soccer. I could sit down and I could have a picnic with my friends, or I could listen, lay on a picnic blanket and listen to music, whatever that might be. So this is really those natural environments where there's the opportunity to leverage it in a variety of different ways. It's not a playground, it's not a baseball field. And so that's where, as we think about city parks, we're going to see those represented slightly differently because they don't meet our definition of open space in the way that we're talking about it here today. So this is really those natural environments, place where we're going to see ecosystems, places where we're going to see some trails, and other green space that people can leverage in a variety of ways.
For those definitions, I'll just refer folks back to, that slide number 10. So when you're thinking open lot, I'm guessing that would fit more in underutilized property.
Sorry, say that one more time.
Yes.
Yes.
Can I just follow up on my?
Yeah, as long as you're clarifying questions, because we can, I don't want to drill into things that might get answered in future too.
Yeah, again, I could imagine your meeting really got into the weeds, right? Because it's really easy for me to start going there, but, so just in your definition, you know, but it's really helpful for me to understand as, once we start getting farther along, you know, in the future about where to go. So like at Keller, where we got a ton of picnic pavilions, that whole space is considered open space, or the designated picnic areas would not, because there's infrastructure there, we've got restrooms there, it's a defined use that can't be interchanged with other uses, kind of a litany, you can only manage.
Yeah, so the definition includes some amount of building that may be able to be leveraged by folks who are leveraging it. So that is a good example of something that does meet our definition of open space, even though it has a shelter on it. There are other spaces within that environment that meet the definition.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Just as we're going with the definition, because I don't want to get off track here.
You can tap in anytime.
So does it mean that it's not is it designated as not developable, or it could be developable, open space?
Right now, we, out of the three buckets, or that we have, or out of the three definitions, so we have, official, open, you know, kind of the official definition where, for example, like our county-owned parks and trails or city-owned parks are included in that, so that's a official open space. But then
So not to be developed.
right, and then you have an unofficial open space where it doesn't quite meet our definition, but it still provides some components of what an open space is, and we'll get more of that later on in the presentation, but that is more, either controlled by another governmental entity or private, because there is several private,
It's beautiful.
land areas that are also acting as open space, so it fits into both of those.
So we may get there, you can stop me then, but so it's land that maybe at some point could be for sale, but it's not for sale now, and people are using it as a lot, as an open lot, or?
So I think the question that you're getting at, we will dive deeper into during the underutilized discussion. So that's where land may have a variety of purposes, but may not necessarily align with the original.
I have a very quick question. Golf courses, open space or not?
Pardon me?
Golf courses, open space or not?
As of right now, obviously, there's still some additional, that's needed on there, but as far as golf courses, they're classified for a park and rec type use, so they would be considered open space, on that one, but there really needs, it boils down to what the land actually was for at the time. If it was purchased for a park purpose, then yes, if it wasn't, then no.
Oh, okay.
And we'll just, again, there are additional reports and maps that we can make available to you where we identify the distinctions between clear open space versus something like a golf course or an arena, and we can always provide those to you guys. Right. It's a draft report where you are welcome to dive deeper and provide us with additional thoughts or feedback as a result of that. We just had to narrow in some of what we were providing today so we could not give everyone too much to chew.
Do you have another clarification?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I know.
Yes, thank you. And some communities, along with, you know, the Twin Cities area, are beginning to question what that open space definition really affords us. There are certainly some limitations, that there are ways of not getting around, but actually destroying, such as schoolyards that are used as open space in cities that are going to green schoolyards and opening them up for use. And although there may be a playground there, there's also open space. So I think the entire area would be, in that case, considered green space. It's not closed off. It's used for community purposes and welcomes neighbors to, you know, accommodate themselves in that space. And I know that as I looked at this, I was concerned because 0.3% of that open space is designated for school districts, and I wondered, well, that doesn't seem right with all the regulations. I get it now, and I welcome the opportunity for us to do some out-of-the-box thinking here about ways in which we can collaborate for the future.
Go ahead, Ron.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Carter, we agree on the implications piece of the go forward. That would be actually part of the recommendation. So I think we'll come back to that. I share similar thoughts. I think it's important from the baseline of where we start. It's also a lot easier for us as our definition changes. You can see we have a foundation here. I think it's important to note, we start from the idea of natural resource amenity and open space being accessible to everyone as a county. And then cities often ask the question through a slightly more recreational lens. And it's important to get a sense of how they interweave together. That's a little bit of where you see our anchoring bias at the outset. And over time here, as we hone it, we can continue to work on it.
Absolutely.
Well, and I think this discussion just captures the complexity of work that was done by that team and how hard it was. I don't know why you started with definitions,
Yeah.
so let's.
All right, well, let's move on to the next slide right here. Is there any other quick?
No,
Okay.
no.
Very good.
I'm
Trying to get us to move on, right?
All right, so, now that we're diving into the open space assessment here, so you can see the total amount of acres spread across the county for each governmental agency. So at the top, you'll see that, the county is the winner here with a little over 7,900 acres on that one. But you can see see the split on that. But what this is really important, what it shows is that Ramsey County is just one piece of the puzzle on this one. And beyond that, it's 15% of the Ramsey County is park or open space, so, or 25.63 or 63 square miles. So that's all of Ramsey County on that one. But beyond that, really there needs to be further assessment to really understand ownership of open spaces versus management of open space. So there's really get down into the weeds on that one, but there needs to be further assessment on that one. I'd like to move to the next slide right here. So now that we understand kind of the total area of open space, what does it mean, and how will it determine if there was any gaps? So what we ended up doing is we chose a methodology that was developed by the National Park for a 10-minute walk or a 2/3 mile buffer. And really what that means is, can you realistically get to an open space within 10 minutes or a two-thirds of a mile buffer? So that's what we ended up studying. So each of the open space areas, or the Ramsey County, as well as other governmental agencies, we put that buffer on that to really start seeing, are there any gaps in Ramsey County on that one? The good thing is 94% of the county is covered or is within a 10-minute walk of some sort of open space area. So that's really important to see. As you can see on the graphic to the right, it's light green color. There's only minor areas that are starting to identify as gaps, and those are kind of the irregular diagonal shaped areas. So it's got a diagonal hatch in there. You have to see where those areas are at on that one. And then it's also important to know, and on this one, and you can see it more clearly in the next slide, that a lot of these pieces are really irregular shaped. They've got kind of weird outside edges to it. And really what that means is that it's the outside edge of whatever that buffer was. So that's the boundary of areas that are outside that 10-minute walk or buffer to that. So that's why it has an irregular shape to it.
Do you need it now, or can we wait till?
It's on this map. So the big chunks, is that where people live, or, I mean, what are the big chunks?
So we're going to actually get to that more.
Okay.
This next slide
Go ahead.
actually shows it a little better. So on this one, now that we
Right.
So now that we talked about the methodology and coverage of how to look at some of these gaps, I really want to dive a little further into what these sites mean, or these gaps. So we termed them as park deserts. And really what that is meaning is that, there isn't anything inside those areas that meet our open space definition. Now, there might be other things in there that are outside of that definition, but that's how we looked at it on this one, so. But the good thing, so we did identify 19 total sites, across the county, and then, 3 of them we're gonna dive into, a little bit further on this one. And then what we ended up doing, now that we identified our buffer areas, we started to identify our gaps, what we ended up doing is we overlaid this data on 2020 census data, because we really wanted to get a look at where are these potential gaps, and are they affecting any of our communities within Ramsey County? So on here, there are 3 sites that we noted. You'll see there in a big bold circle, sites D, G, and J. And those 3 sites are in significant racially and ethnically diverse areas within St. Paul, on that. So, we'll cover a little bit more with that. So that, we're starting to kind of hone in on, is there any gaps, or how is it affecting the community on that? So in the next 3 slides, what I'd like to do is I'd like to just dive in just a little further into those 3 sites that I had mentioned, sites D, G, and J. So, site D, site D is, it's located in, East St. Paul. It's about 445 acres in size. The site is dominated by an urban core area with multiple land uses, so several land uses throughout that whole area. And then, so in this area, during our assessment, there was no official open space areas that met our definition, but there are nearby recreation facilities that are either inside the site or adjacent. For example, like Harding Arena, Conway Recreation Center, or nearby high schools. And then, as a reminder, that parks with established functions, i.e. baseball fields, playgrounds, are not included in the open space definition that we established for the project. And then lastly, as far as pedestrian connectivity, there is connectivity through this area. There is shouldered streets for biking, and there is also bike lanes on established roadways. So our next site that I'd like to talk, that we highlighted, so this one is site G. It is located on both sides of I-94 near Lexington Avenue, and it's 105 acres size. Like the previous site that we just talked about, urbanized core area, multiple land uses on that one. And then additionally, just like site D, our assessment found that there was no official public open spaces that met our definition inside, but again, there are other facilities that are in or near this. For example, there's private open space that might be near Concordia University or other high schools. So you start seeing some of the dynamics on this one as well. And then additionally on this one, pedestrian connectivity is covered, very similar like the other site. But one thing that I'd like to actually mention on this one that we were actually discovered through the presentation review for the open space project, that there was a new park that came online last year. So this, we had pulled data in late 2021, so that was the best data that we had at that time, so it came on shortly afterwards. But the addition of that park will almost completely remove this whole park desert area. So it would all be covered within inside of that. So it was something good to understand with this area. And then the last site that I'd like to talk about, so this one is site J. It's located near the Ramsey County, Dakota County border. It's 40 acres in size. Again, it's the same urbanized core area, multiple land uses. There were no official open space areas, again, that met our definition, but there are other recreation facilities either near or in it as well as the pedestrian connectivity is still provided very similar to the other sites. And then lastly, what I'd like to do in the next two slides here, I just want to highlight 4 open space recommendations. So the first recommendation is unofficial open space. So this is land that meets the open space definition, but is not public land. Some of the key takeaways on that one is a layering of official and unofficial open space areas exists across Ramsey County. Take for example, like in Site G that we had talked about. Site G, Park Visit Area, does not have official open space in the defined area, but it does have private open space like Concordia College or high schools. And then in those areas where unofficial open space exists, there may be a need to convene additional discussions with the community and partners on that. The second recommendation is that it revolves around open space gaps. So this is where no land exists that meets the open space definition of private or public. Some of the key takeaways are that properties identified where no open space exists should be assessed further for potential sharing of open space opportunities. This recommendation also supports efforts to establish open space residents that are in a walkable distance from their homes or other residential areas, as well as this recommendation also ties back to the example of unofficial open spaces regarding further dialogue with community partners and other government agencies. And then the last 2 recommendations that we feel important are dialogue and communication. Recommendation number 3 is about the importance for continued dialogue with other public partners. Now, this is a critical step that we see because it's a way that we can elevate existing gaps in a cross-sector approach on that. So how we can battle that, as well as in recommendation number 4, is focused on communication with residents and other government agencies across Ramsey County. And why that's good is we're doing good work already to ensure residents have access to open space or information that on those areas, but information should be shared with our residents, partners, and letting them know that we're doing well and where we can do better. So that wraps up the open space section. So from here, I'd like to open up for questions.
Great. I'm going to start just by noting that the need for continued work with our partners. North Oaks is basically a park. It's not open.
It's a private.
It's private, but pretty much everyone in North Oaks, unless
Every lot has their own park.
yeah. So I mean, just thinking through that, it is not a park desert. Like you are driving through the North Woods when you're there. It's beautiful. I don't think anyone there would think they live in a park desert. So thinking through that, and also like looking at Site C, which is very large, that's like the military land, and there's like the AHOT's wildlife observation area there. I'd kind of argue that maybe that is a bit of open space if we're really thinking deeply about it. So thinking about, and those are like the 2 biggest ones we see in Ramsey County. And so just continuing to dig deep on that, and whether it's putting some asterisks on things or working with the partners there, I think may be important. I'll go to you, and then I've got.
Madam Chair, I'll just, and I don't have a perfect recommendation on how we do it. I agree, we need to convene, and we see the same, home and airfield's a weird one too. When we've done other assessments early on around economic demographics, there's always some of these pieces. Yeah. For the definition of open space, the one thing I would say is to live up to the values of the board and where we are going as an organization, it's who has access to that open space, and if the answer isn't everyone, then it can't meet our definition, which is not to say residents locally don't have access oftentimes. And so that's part of the convening we need to think through and figure out is, if we want to declare it as open space, it means anyone in this room could walk in there right now and feel as though it's open to them. And we just know we have areas where that's where the private control and different overlaps, we have work we get to continue to do.
Yeah, I think we could validly say anyone who lives in North Oaks
Yes.
has access to those spaces, so they're within a 10-minute walk of the park. So if there's potentially someone in the township might not, like, I'm trying to look at, that just looks like all of North Oaks. So I think you could validly say none of those people are in a desert, even if people outside of a 10-minute walk couldn't access those spaces, because those people who have more than a 10-minute walk don't live in North Oaks. So just trying to balance that narrative there, that we're trying to say two different,
Yeah.
when we're defining the park desert.
Yes, and Madam Chair, Commissioners, I do want to note that the team took the time to do a detailed little documentation on each and every one of the individual park deserts that's identified there, where we note some of those interesting components, such as this one can in essence be disregarded because all of these people have access to their own private parks. So we do that for each of the specific elements that's identified, and again, we can provide that so that and provide feedback on that.
Excellent, and I saw hands all the way around, so I'm just going to start with Commissioner
Okay,
Carter,
thank
and we'll
you.
go in a circle.
Let me just take a moment to admire the work. Thank you so very, very much for this inquisition into what we have for open space and for our taking on this role as a county to look across and include all our partners, the impact that that can have as we all continue our efforts in the future to ensure everybody has access. I think it's quite great. I wanted to note that as you started out talking about this work, you referenced the National Association of Parks and Recreation,
Yes.
or something like National Parks and Recreation Association. And I appreciate that work is lifted up at a national level through that association. It also is by a partner that we have here, and that is Trust for Public Lands, who is actually running the campaign for the 10-minute walk nationally and here. And there's a lot of exciting work going on throughout the United States. I was actually at a Trust for Public Lands a couple of weeks ago and saw some examples of creative work that's being done in communities to preserve land, to make sure there's a 10-minute walk, and to ensure that we create new parks throughout the nation. There's a lot of potential for creativity here. So as you look through and continue this work, I wanted to make certain that we are connecting also with Trust for Public Lands. We have had an initial conversation. I know that our planning director, Elizabeth Tolzman, has. And I would just want to know if you are in touch and in relationship now, or welcome the opportunity to make sure those links exist for continuing this work.
So, Commissioners, that is not a relationship we've established at this point. We've been mostly an internal team working to try to build the information.
And your work is admired, and we'll make sure that you do get those connections.
Thanks, Madam Chair. We were just looking at these, the big places that you kind of say, oh, what is that? So we just identified that in the Roseville area, because Roseville actually has a rule that everyone has to be with Site B, that everyone has to be within 5 minutes walk of a park. In Roseville, I think that's their rule. So, but we just identified it's Gross Golf Course and cemetery, which arguably, people use cemeteries all the time for public spaces. I walk all the time in cemeteries. And then the golf course. Let me just say, these are great places to walk. It's beautiful. They're beautiful. Anyway, it's also Gross Golf Course. So just to put it in the mix, I mean, we appreciate all of your work, but that was like what's that? What's that desert near me? That's a golf course and a cemetery. So I guess as we're figuring out these definitions, that's my question. And just because of the long, narrow parts, does that mean like I'm thinking of a cell phone tower where if things come to about here and then you're like, 100 feet from or you're maybe a block out of a 10-minute walk? Is that sort of what that looks like when you have a long?
Great question. If you think
Yeah.
about, like, my pen as the park,
Yeah.
then this circle is the buffer around it.
Yeah.
And so because of that, the gaps are gonna have these really irregular boundaries,
Yeah.
kind of these places that just fall between things.
Yeah.
That's exactly the right way to think about it.
You live right here.
Yeah. Believe me, I know, right. I do that with cell phone towers, right there in between them, yeah. So, okay, thank you for that, and I just was gonna bring out that other little nuance in Site B. Thank you.
First of all, I want to echo the good work.
Yeah, thank you.
This is really the first time in my time being here that we've dug this, gone this deep on this stuff, yeah. I'm still digesting most of it, to be honest with you. And I didn't focus in, I, right away, when I saw no folks, I agree with you, Nicole, I said, well, that's not us. But I'm more curious as the conversations go on, how we use this information and so forth to really get to that goal, I assume it is, that so our residents are within 10, whatever, minutes of walking to a green space. Because I get the comments, I think I shared this with you, Ryan, in the past. You know, as we built up our density, I have more and more of my constituents questioning, are you making room for green space? It seems like we don't have enough as we create more density. So I see this tool as very useful because we could go off on the track, everything was transit-oriented development, but we never really talked about parks. And so that's how my wheels are still spinning. I guess I have no comments other than that. Still processing the information, but good work.
Commissioner Ortega, I think that was the very reason why I asked for
Yeah.
this multiple times, was
Yeah.
every time we tried to develop something, someone said, but it should be a park.
Yeah.
We need to know where our spaces are. I'll let Ryan.
Madam
jump
Chair,
in.
Commissioner Ortega, I appreciate, I think we're all trying to learn, and part of the discussion today is an opportunity to hear from everybody and really think. But there are two immediate reactions to that I would share. I agree on the perception piece wholeheartedly. One, and I think parks undersold this in their individual part of this, but this is a part of the broader 21st century parks piece here, and saying you can't move forward without first having like an understanding of who we are and where open space exists. So this fits there, this ties into park hours, it ties into all of these bigger conversations. And I want to give credit to the entire team for helping on a parks initiative become a county initiative. You can really see that. The other piece that it goes back to the conversation we've been having about cultivating economic prosperity for a while is we need to continue to, the real challenge becomes when people only want to see very low impact density. That is the only time then you have to start making trade-offs with this map. We have plenty of ways to smartly develop in ways that are environmentally and economically sound, that allow us to build out transit, that allow us to keep this amazing green space map. But I do think it helps us prioritize where those conversations become heightened, because if you're in Site D, or you're gonna take away green space on something that expands a red area, I mean, that's a red flag that we should be bringing before conversations differently, and we haven't had that before. So I think that's one part, but we look forward to using this and getting more thoughts on how.
Yeah, and I'll say, like, I could see us, if we got to a place where we had like a climate impact on our request for board actions, and does this provide some additional support for the Reconnect Rondo work? Saying if that space there, as we reconnect Rondo over 94, were a green space, I think we eliminate most of that gap.
And,
Yeah.
Well, that was one where a new park actually
Right.
did come
Yeah.
online, so it,
Just use this.
I hear you.
But, yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
But being able to show, like, this is a space where we need it.
And I just wanted to add to that is true that there is a new park there. It is Midway Peace Park. It was widely celebrated. Of course, our legislators came in and helped to launch the park. It was a partnership of organizations that came together. And that is a place where, again, the partnership of Trust for Public Land came into play. we were able to find the resources and work with the city and make sure that the neighbors were engaged. It was a community-developed park. It's right there by Gordon Park. I mention this again because we're also working on schoolyards, Maxfield Elementary. There's not enough public amenity. So although we can say that it's within a 10-minute walk and we've cured that, you know, we also, as we get down the road in this work, want to look at amenities and want to look to ensure that we have quality parks and that they are available to everyone in our county. So again, there's a lot of work to be done. Don't discount this area because all of a sudden there's a park there. The availability and accessibility to all is what is important.
That brings up another data dive is, okay, how many people are going to how
Yeah,
many acres?
exactly.
And what does that look like?
Yeah.
Which goes to my point, Madam Chair, because we were joking about Site B. We think it's the cemetery and the golf course. I mean, actually, nobody lives there, so it's not really a desert. I mean, yeah, I mean, I guess, yeah. People in eternity live there, but, I mean, but there is. I mean, I'm just, you know, because obviously we can't just look at these as, I mean, that's not a desert like Site D, G, which is why you called those out, I can see, but.
The population
Really,
piece of it
The
is important.
density piece is very.
Yeah, the density is really a good factor there.
Yeah.
Commissioner Reinhardt.
I'm not sure how to follow that. Well, I remember that we had, when we were trying to build out our trail system, we did have a map of, you know, where the miles of trails that we had and how it connected things and where we had big gaps. That was quite a long time ago. I mean, that goes back to Greg Mack and trying to figure out where do we have gaps there. I would like to see that because I assume that the trails are not part of open space. It's how you get to open space sometimes, or how does, that's my first question, is how do trails fit into all of this?
Trails do fit into open space.
Okay, so,
Sections, so, and so you have to, trails are part of open space, just like our like a regular park, or an open space, or a regional park, or a city park, so,
but
so
that's within the park, the trails within the park.
yeah, the trails within the park, yes,
Okay.
that's all part of the park, but what I'm talking about is, for example, regional trails. Regional trails are different because it's more of a long linear, and to be honest, they're kind of like a linear park system.
Okay.
But they're, for right now, most time you see them just connecting other regional facilities or providing that access, but they're still open space.
Which is, I'm looking forward to finding out what happened to Go Ramsey. That, something like that, I don't care what it's called. But, I think that was something that people really enjoyed and kind of lost track of it, obviously. My second question is about, I'm part of the County Road E, group that's been trying to figure out what to do all the way along County Road E. And it was interesting because whoever said, you know, it should be a park. That's one of the things that came up, but the developers that were there at one of the workshops anyhow was saying, well, do you really think, there was one particular corner in White Bear Lake, where Matospa School is on one side, County Road E is very busy, so are you really gonna have, and there's all this open space there that they can't seem to get developed, they're trying to figure out what to do. And he said, well, do you really think the kids from the Matospa School are gonna go across the County Road E to get to that open space? You have to figure out, is somebody actually going to use it, or is there a better use? And I think that's probably what you're getting to in the next, category of underutilized, space. And then my final, so I just am talking about that because it is something that, unless they were questioned about it, they didn't really think about it. It was like, well, open space, how can you be against open space? Well, it's not being against it, it's what makes the most sense. And you can't expect a developer to come in and say, okay, you can only develop that little part of it because we want the rest of it for open space. Well, it's not gonna work from a, cost standpoint. My final question is, for this time around anyway, is, there's the no net loss But I think from what I'm understanding, you're saying the open space that we're listing as open here is not the no net loss space. You know what I'm?
Great question, Commissioner, Madam Chair. So we intentionally took no net loss out of our discussion for the frame today. Not that our team didn't consider or try to understand how it impacted this, but because the no net loss charter is more complicated and in certain situations against other parcels, it became clear that it would overcomplicate the information that we were sharing here today. So we really took that out of the scope of our work as a group, and Parks is certainly working in partnership with the county manager to help advance that so that you all can have a more robust conversation about that. For the purposes of this conversation, we understand much of the open space that we've shared with you here today that Ramsey County owns and operates is likely impacted by the no net loss charter. We just didn't feel it was appropriate for us as a group and the way that we came together to.
So then I guess, again, the comment going all the way back to the beginning regarding the trails. I mean, Scott, you've done so much in the White Bear Lake community, especially on trails, and you've taken a lot of abuse, unfortunately. Actually, to the rest of the county board, they had a letter to the editor that was horrible. And Scott was treated terribly, and I called the editor and told him, I said, how dare you? You've got somebody that's worked really hard, and you just let this letter be printed. And so I was not happy about that. And but the thing is, in order to get to some of the open space and to have the trails so that all people can access it, it's going to go through property, or not their property. It's property that is owned by somebody else, and they feel like the street and everything else in front of them and any open space that's behind them or wherever is theirs. And so it sounds, when you're looking at the pictures, it sounds easy, but the work that you guys are doing, all of you are doing as far as trying to make sure that people have access, is easier said than done. And not easily said sometimes.
Very difficult. Trail projects are usually one of the most difficult, complicated projects. Just because they stress with so many communities, so many impacts as far as how does it connect on the property.
So I just, again, you're doing a great job, and it is something that is important as far as getting to open spaces too.
McDonough?
Well, I'm beginning to see why you needed an attorney as a part of your team. No, this is really good work, and I'm really glad that we're doing this. This is kind of the foundational work, and the bigger questions are gonna be like, what's the next conversation? But then it's always, be careful what you ask too, right? That Site D, that's all in my district. I'm very familiar with that community, and I'm thinking back, so how, what happens in there? What do they do, And in some ways, we get really creative as communities to adapt. I think I can think of, off the top of my head, 2 really big churches there, right? They own a whole city block, but their church and parking lot take up a third of it. The rest of it is really community open space that the church encourages people to do there. So one of them actually built a tot lot for the community, for the kids. They host community gatherings there. So I get worried when we say we got these deserts, right? Or, the North Oaks one we joke about, but the fact is, kind of to your point, how many people actually live there, right? Their lots are huge. They developed it that way on purpose. It was intentional for it to come up that way. And so I get, a little concerned about how stuff gets presented. But then I think the biggest value moving forward is both sides of the coin that, you brought up, Commissioner Fretham, is so many times on one side, everybody's saying more, more, more. You haven't done enough, more. Everything has to go to, every opportunity you got to, preserve for open space. And then you've got the other side, wait a minute here. This really gives us a framework about where those strategic investments need to occur, where we're missing the boat, right? Communities that already have a ton of access to high quality open space and amenities versus communities that are, you know, certainly in Site D, they got creative, and they're not missing out on opportunities, but do they have the same amenities, and does it feel the same as folks that live in Highwood Hills that can walk across the streets of Battle Creek? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
And so it helps us to become more strategic. It helps us to, you know, defend our investments and for people to understand. I think, you know, even the purists that would support this would be surprised how much and how extensive we have a system already, right? But then it's gonna be incumbent about where we go forward, about how strategic we are. Because if we're gonna stay true to our values, here again, just like this morning when we, you know, we talked about equity all the time. Once, you know, the words can come easy, the actions and walking the talk get harder and harder and harder. And that means saying no to some folks because they already got a ton of access. And it means saying, we've got to figure out what we're gonna do over here. And I think that's the groundwork that you guys are laying for the next conversation. So, good job. You might need 2 attorneys for the next one.
Right. Yeah, I mean, this is a situation of it. You know, as we start looking at this, like, I had more questions than not, and that's not to say you didn't do really great work, because the first map is always the hardest, and then it's the overlays that people actually want to get to. And so as I'm thinking about this, is I want to compare this to then what land is actually developable, and then what does the county own, and I bet we're far under 1,000 acres of even available land that could be developed, and thinking about, you know, what the next goes back to all of our other work. And then kind of to Jim's point is that even though we might have parks in all these areas within a 10-minute walk, I can assure you that not all 10-minute walks are equal. Mm-hmm. And it isn't about distance. You know, in my district, I think of like Snelling and University. Mm-hmm. Yeah. There might be a park in 10 minutes, but depending on what corner you live on, it might not be accessible at all, and you're landlocked because it's not safe. And even though we might have I laugh at the shouldered bikeway, that's all garbage. That's not safe in our community, shouldered bikeways, to even count it as a 10-minute walk. And so I don't want to be disparaging. We've got a ton of green space and a ton of open space, but we want to make sure then it's equitable in how we access it in the other investments. Not that we need to create more green space, but the connectivity is going to be critical. And so the next map, if I can put in a wish list of overlays, is really what is that connectivity of real pedestrian and bike infrastructure, not a painted line, and then what land is available that could be developed potentially, and then where does that overlay to green space go? Because I think that changes our strategy. And as I listened to the recommendations I was a little surprised to even hear recommendations, because I don't know that we have agreed on everyone has to have a 10-minute walk or what that looks like. And so a little, you know, like, wait a minute, there's a whole lot more here before we get to recommendations.
Madam Chair, I'm going to ask you, Madam Chair, Commissioner Mattis, one pointed question though. I mean, are you arguing against the idea that everyone should be in, I mean, this is a pretty common benchmark.
No, I'm not arguing against it, but okay. I think that there will be times that we can acknowledge that an 11-minute walk is okay because we have to develop that piece of land.
Yep.
So I think it's a goal to strive for, but I don't want us to stop other work that we're doing because we can't quite get there.
That's a helpful clarification, because and that's not, we're not proposing that, and that's not where it is. I do think having a common benchmark that most people can get to, it's like transit access is actually pretty similar, and we're finally realizing telling someone to walk 20 minutes is probably not reliable transit access for most people. And I do appreciate that, and part of it today is not about final recs. I do, just a couple of just tight points. There's a clear partnership potential with St. Paul Public Schools specifically, not to say other school districts don't matter to this, but because of where some of the sites that got circled lie, you know, we don't have a shared understanding or common use policy or alignment there, and then that leads to the conversation on amenities within those sites, and how do you, like, that stood out the second I got a chance to see this with the team the first time. And what does that even look like to convene that? The other spot I want to go from, like, super local to much broader is, I haven't seen a county, I've never seen a county do this map. I've seen cities do this map through Trust for Public Land, they get scored on it, and you know, actually, we're fortunate that we live in a community where we have a lot of cities that score remarkably high compared to most of the country. I want to commend the idea of like, the thought here of how they went about the work and applying a frame that made sense. I don't know, and as we go to NACO, like, you're always talking about what are the right things to lift up. I mean, this feels like a really good one to lift up nationally, because I don't know, there are other counties that have done this, I would like to see their maps. And if they haven't, I'd like to see them do a map, you know?
Well, and before we move to underutilized land, I'll just add that, I don't think even if we have a goal of everyone within 10 minutes of park, I don't think it's necessarily incumbent on us to purchase the land that way. Like, if something is being developed here, I think that's one where we look at working with the city to say, hey, you guys are in a real open space gap here. You need to, like, how do we get that from the developer? Or as we look at where we're putting money in from CED for some of our investments, how do we look at this map as part of it? You know, as we're talking about critical corridors right now, what is the space along that? How do we use this in multiple other areas? We do only have 10 minutes left for underutilized land identification, which is great because we're not going to be talking about how they're all going to be used. We're just going to go through it today, and they'll be coming back later with those ideas. So let's
You've given instructions.
let's give Martha 10 minutes to walk us through this, because we know we're going to have more conversations later. I've got a buzz cut anytime.
We'll see how we shortchange you on time.
You're welcome, Martha.
There we go.
Focus related on open space, not on underutilized land. So, I'm just gonna bring us back to the definition here, which our group agonized over. This all was a lot of technical work, but it's the idea of parcels, buildings, and facilities that are not used at their full capacity, including land that could be repurposed or preserved for recreational, aesthetic, conservation, or other development purposes. And as we did this inventory, we realized we did need to kind of capture this additional category of underutilized land. But as Commissioner Fressum just said, this is not the primary goal of doing extensive, really the inventory and bringing that all to you today. And I also just want to remind us that, again, as has been said a couple of times, cities are the primary actor in terms of kind of defining land use in terms of comp planning and zoning. So with that, you can see the sites that were defined primarily by Public Works and Property Management. And a lot of these properties are already very familiar to you all and are already in some sort of a reuse kind of study process. And then there's some small parcels as well. None of these sites that are identified overlap with the park deserts definition that we were earlier. And so with that, I'm already it's not even really recommendations, because again, we weren't doing analysis, but we did want to just reference the departments within the county that are kind of adjacent to or involved in land use who may be interested in this study, and that includes the Summerlands Project work of health and wellness service team and health, as well as, of course, public parks and recreation, community and economic development, and public. I believe that's it.
Wow. That's impressive.
All right, well, I do,
Go,
Summerlands
You're hired. You're
The
hired.
Summerlands, isn't that when they allow groups to apply to use open space?
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, I just couldn't remember.
Temporary uses.
Like art or garden or
Because we have a second, I am curious. Several of these sites are under various stages of future planning. I think the Larpenteur and Kent, that's the Environmental Resource Center, right? Just curious what the other one is. What's the other one? You said several of these sites are already under review.
Yeah, well, you can see, Boys Totem Town, the
ponds, oh, yeah, the ponds, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, River's Edge, okay, so I'm
Yeah.
seeing those, oh, okay. I guess we can sort of guess what they are then, all of them I know.
Well, I mean, Larpenteur and Kent, we forget, we actually used to have 2 juvenile detention centers. Larpenteur and Kent was where Woodview was, that we actually kept kids out of their homes. Closed that one a long time ago. Actually, Volunteers for America ran it as a women's center for a while. I don't know if they still are.
They are.
They have it.
They're there.
That used to be our second juvenile detention center.
Wow. Center now, or it's a.
Yeah, VOA is still a
Yeah,
partner
still
with us
there.
on the site, Madam Chair, but, I didn't know that other piece.
Actually, that's a nice site.
That's where the Environmental Resource Center is proposed right now, yeah. So that's what's going in there, I think.
Behind a cemetery park.
Behind a cemetery. That's true.
Cemetery open space.
People can go to that cemetery, head over to the, resource site.
You've walked through it.
Oh, I totally walked that one.
Other questions? All right, so we're adding cemeteries to our, no, to be honest, I took some beautiful cemetery walks while I was out in Boston, so maybe we should be advertising.
They're
Well-
safe, the walkways are generally safe.
A big thank you to,
Nobody in there's gonna bother you.
I'll
Not
send
at
a
night, not at night.
couple plaques.
getting a little punchy
Yeah.
kind of day. Thank you to our Economic Growth and Community Investment Team. This was a remarkable undertaking. I'm super excited about it, and I would concur with Ryan that I think this is stuff we need to be showing off to everyone. And so excited to see where we go with it. I think too, some of the points and things that I heard is now that we've got this data, let's dig in deeper, let's do an equity analysis. I think, I'm not a data person, but somewhere there's a number of people versus number of acres within a 10-minute walk of open space that I think would be very revealing, and kind of digging in with our partners on how can we use this, and outstanding questions on what is our goal, what should our policy be on open space and access to open space in terms of percentage in the county and accessibility, and then how do we layer in over that amenities and trails and corridors and how folks get to them. So lots of work has been done, lots more to do, but I'm excited that we've gotten this far. And with that, I will adjourn unless any of you want to. All right.